Hey everyone, my name is Mark Seither. I'm a solutions architect with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and I represent PCAI, or Private Cloud for AI. And this is an offering that I'm going to tell you about today. We're calling it, and I think this is very true, and it's really being received well. We're calling it kind of our turnkey AI factory. And so, without any further ado, my name's Mark Seither. I've been doing this now for about 6.5 years, a little over 6 years. With Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And so this product that we have, that I'm going to tell you about, has been through many iterations, right? I came on 6.5 years ago, and the entirety of my duration with this, with HPE, has been with this suite of software products that are represented as a component inside of the larger PCAI, or Private Cloud for AI. And so this is not something that we just threw together. This is something that we've been working at and developing for a long time. This has come through internal development as well as acquisition, and we've been blending different components that we've acquired along the way or built ourselves to create something that's really compelling and really unique in the market. My background is in, I would say, horizontal AI and data management, and so I started my career as a technical writer, technical trainer, and worked with a company based in Austin that was trying to attack the democratization of AI problem 10 years ago, long before the advent of all of these LLMs and these things that have changed our world. Also, one of our HPE AI ambassadors, and a dad to 3 girls, 5 and under, which is my greatest joy in life, also my greatest frustration.
Welcome to the club.
So I like to start off, and this is a hot take, and I understand that. I used to always use this slide and say AI doesn't exist, right? At least not in the way that people talk about it commonly. And I'm a storyteller. I like to weave in pieces of my life, right, to kind of make points. And I have a friend, he's my best friend. He's been my best friend since we were 12 years old. And he's a nervous person. He's a doctor. And he calls me up and he says, probably once every year or so, maybe once or twice a year. And he's like, did you see this headline? AI is going to take over the world. And it's hilarious because and he knows I work in the space. And so I always have to talk him off the ledge and say, hey man, like I totally understand it. But what you're thinking about, what a lot of us think about, right? The whole alien with, the humanoid kind of robots, HAL 9000, Matrix, right? That type of AI is not even close. It's not even on the horizon, right? And so I think people conflate a lot of times these headlines, these kind of fantastic headlines that we read, and people will talk to an LLM, and it'll kind of seem like it's giving them, answers about questions that it might not be supposed to have like insight into, right? Or it's got plans, and it's simply not the reality of the situation. The reality is that we've gotten really good at telling machines what to do, and they do it really fast. They do it a lot faster than we can really comprehend, and they do it nonstop, right? And so that creates this interesting place, because this was always, I've been saying this for 5 years now. Then in 22, when ChatGPT came out, it kind of hit so hard. And so throughout the last couple of years of learning the technology, understanding, on a deeper level, I now have amended this slide to, now AI has reached a tipping point. I won't say that AI doesn't exist, and I'll tell you why. It's because of the outcomes. The outcomes of the AI that we have are so close to being the types of outcomes that you would want from actual AI that it's kind of indistinguishable practically. It doesn't matter to make this delineation, right? It's still something that we can talk about how AI is not going to take over the world. It's not self-thinking, right? But the outcomes are so good that we would be fools to bury our head in the sand and say, not understand this has the potential to radically shift the way that we live, the way that we work. The applications are practically limitless. Oh, and if I didn't mention before, I love questions, and I know this is a forum, and I'm excited.
There's a lot of disagreement on where AI and AGI is today, and how quickly we'll see something with the potential for serious existential risk versus whatever. I mean, there's, you know, we can go on and on. That sort of subject has a no-ending conversation, but
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think the risk is presenting what we have today as what we think is going to be in the future.
Yeah, I think the things that, I mean, if you really boil it down, like in the same way as you might say the internet is just ones and zeros, if you really boil it down, an LLM is just matrix multiplication, right? If we take all the architecture and the actual implementation out of the way, that's what it is at its core. And that's what it is. We told machines how to take number representations of tokens or bits of words, and we taught them how to make a lot of correlations between those things. And then when we query them, we're just saying, what is the next best string of words to complete based on my input, right? So that's the function. The whole, you know, something that could be dangerous. Yeah, we could go on for a long time arguing about that, but I feel pretty comfortable right now with where we are. And so as part of that, I like to talk about all of the applications that we have of AI, and this is the landscape that I'm involved in every single day with my customers, with new customers, existing customers, talking about ways that they can either adopt technology or continue to expand that technology footprint inside of their organization. And these things go, obviously there's a horizontal component here, right? So the horizontal use cases, the ones, has anyone ever not used a chatbot? Yeah, it's a part of our daily lives. And so naturally, as something that we've adopted into our lives, work follows suit, right? Maybe sometimes work is the leader, where we want to figure out how we can adopt things like chatbots, right? Or content summarization tools, right? Why do I have to read through a big long document if something can summarize the salient points for me in, you know, a paragraph rather than 10 pages, right? I'm able to accelerate my time. Task and workflow automation are across every industry. There are things that you can automate, right? And there's a bunch of different techniques to do that we'll talk more about. And I'll skip the content and all that stuff. The ones that I think are personally interesting is retail, right, with personalized product recommendations, because that is the specific space that I worked in. Previously with that horizontal AI company, we built, you know, kind of personalized profiles, and we were doing this with graph databases and really sophisticated algorithms 10 years ago. So I think the development in that space is really interesting, and how do we create representations of people that we can use to be able to understand maybe their preferences or their interests. So I think that's a very interesting space. And then edge computer vision is one of the hot buttons for me, because I think it's one of the most interesting spaces. I've talked to all kinds of defense and, you know, level 1 nuke sites, and, you know, how do we do a better job of using camera vision or computer vision to identify threats, potentially anomalies in the signal data? Because currently I can tell you in some conversations that I've had, they have a flip book. The flip book has pictures. There's a guy with boots on walking around with a flip book, and if he sees something that he thinks might look a little odd, he gets his handy dandy flip book out and looks at it and compares and says, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like. Does this look like that? Right? That task is something that could be so well addressed, right, by computer vision or by those types of technologies. So I think that a lot of these it shows the breadth of it, right? And it goes across horizontally, it goes vertically, it goes very deep, right? Health and life sciences is also a huge one. There's all kinds of drug discovery and patient classification. There's a bunch of administrative stuff around hospitals too that I've talked with a ton over the last 2 or 3 years. And so I think realizing the breadth of this space is something that it's easy to think that, you know, oh, the applications could be kind of limited, right? Because it's an LLM. But if you really start to look at it, it's everywhere, right? And its applications are literally everywhere. So one of the things that I like to think about is that a lot of people are afraid that AI is coming for their jobs, and I understand that, right? There was, you know, another large technology company with their HR department and all of that happened somewhat recently, right? And introducing chatbots and things into that. Interestingly, with our customers, and we've done a lot of research in this and surveys, that is not where people are most excited about leveraging AI, right? They're not looking to reduce staff or reduce headcount, or, you know, everyone would like to save money where they can, but that's not really their interest. Their interest is more in how do I make my employees better, faster, more accurate in doing their jobs? And then how do I improve my customer experience, right? How do I delight my customers? So those are the places that we're seeing most of our conversations trend toward. It's not so much let's get rid of people because we're going to replace them with robots. It's now let's figure out how we can be better at what we do. So I think that's very interesting.
Where are these anticipated benefits? Where'd you get this information?
So some of it was a survey that we did internally, and then I think some of it also came from an external. I don't remember the exact quote, but I can get you it afterwards. It was maybe IDC or someone.
I'd be interested in seeing what they mean by employee productivity gain, because I think that's what everyone says, particularly up at the IT executives. Employee productivity gain.
Yeah, I see it as easy examples for me where I have seen that conversation come up are in those things where you would typically feel like you want to employ a chatbot, right, or a RAG application. Because if you give somebody, and I have an example of this that I'll show you in my in the demo that I'm going to do later. I'm going to show you guys a real live working system. But if I have with RAG, right, if I have a whole boatload of documents in a SharePoint, right, I don't know if in your lives you've had to sift through SharePoint. I have. It's not my most favorite function. Not my most favorite. I'll leave it at that. The idea of being able to feed that, right, into a RAG implementation or retrieval augmented generation, right? So how do I understand and reason over a private corpus?
But I get it but I don't really see actual results being generated or talked about. Because I know myself, I can see all sorts of ways of doing it. I know we had a tiny team before. We got in all these great data, 6,000 surveys brought in. This is a long time ago. There was no way our little team could go through it. I'm thinking, wow, something like this could take the three of us and provide great benefit. And yet I'm not hearing so much about this. I've heard a lot of this. All seems to be intuitive, but I'm hearing more about things not working. And I'm just curious, say like the SharePoint example, are you seeing that a lot? I think a lot of this is intuitive, but
I'm seeing those types of RAG implementations everywhere. Almost every customer that I talk to, and it makes sense, right? I'll reference them later. There's a basketball team that I've worked with, a professional basketball team, and that was one of their main things. They said that we have the CBA, the NBA collective bargaining agreement. Every time a law changes in California, we have to hire a team of lawyers to go and look at the collective bargaining agreement, understand the law, right, and then tell us if there's any implications with our player contracts. And so they're like, we have that and a whole bunch of other documents, player contracts, all of these legal documents. It's very, very difficult for us with our staff, which surprisingly, you would think that an NBA team would have unlimited resources, and shockingly to me at least, they don't. So it's not like I can just hire more bodies to throw at the problem, right? We need the staff that we have, but we need to make them better because they are just maxed out having to do this very kind of rote process over and over every day. So that's an interesting anecdote.
I think these are anecdotal, but I'm just thinking, just from reading, and that's why I'm interested, because you're actually out there talking to customers. I don't see a lot of the benefits being touted that you would intuitively think would make small teams able to do much bigger things.
Do you see it because you just haven't read about successful implementations of it? Is that?
Yeah, I think all these things you hear about, well, we can do this, less people to do it, et cetera, but then I don't see any documented use cases or, in fact, I see sort of a fatigue. All these things were promised, and yet I don't hear people then saying, we actually took our headcount down by this and our productivity up by this. I haven't seen a lot of articles that have talked about productivity gains, concrete productivity gains being delivered. But that's just what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and you're playing right into my hand, I have to tell you, because part of my conversation, there's the second section that we have is about the gap, right, from pilot to production. That gap is kind of what you're talking about. Everyone can see intuitively, you can see the interesting capabilities there and how it could be applied. there was a report, and I won't reference it too hard, but there was a report that came out that said 95% failed to achieve ROI. And so we'll talk a little bit about at least some of my opinions, some of my colleagues' opinions on why this is happening and perhaps a way around that. Because I agree, for all of the promise that's there and what can be done, I am not seeing as much success broadly in the market as I initially thought I would, say, a year and a half ago. So I think that's a very real comment.
That's table.
Yeah.
Anybody else before I move on? Okay. We'll leave the other ones for now. So, yes, it's everywhere. Yes, everyone's trying to leverage it. What's stopping people from getting there? And so those challenges and some of the things that we talked about, which are creating that situation where we're not seeing as many like validated reports of the value being realized, I think it ties back to a lot of these things. It started, does this laser work? Oh yeah. It started there on the left, right? Where initially, and still some, I would say, I don't want to say laggards, but right, some customers who maybe are laggards still don't really have an enterprise AI strategy. A lot of customers that I've talked to, and there's one that I'll reference as kind of an example, they are a technology manufacturer, a big one. And I talked to them and they said, we are trying to figure out how, right, we just created kind of like our AI council, we'll call it. And we're trying to figure out how best to implement this, because what we have is we currently have this guy and he built something really, really cool. It was a chatbot, right, that could do document search. And so then he turned it on to a couple of people and they loved it. And so then other people in the Slack channel for it started requesting to join. And then all of a sudden we had 40 or 60 users. And then the hardware started failing because it was on some kind of borrowed old generation hardware. And so how do we go from that, which is something cool that somebody built, and I see that all the time. Somebody built something cool on their laptop or on some servers they had under their desk, right? On this little half rack that's sitting there, or somebody built something really compelling in the cloud, right? How do we scale that? How do we bring that to production? You're still in that space where some people are still trying to find, how are we as an organization going to do this? Are we going to develop on-prem, deploy in the cloud? Are we going to develop in the cloud and deploy on-prem? Are we going to do it all on-prem, all in the cloud, right? How do we do governance of all of this, right? What's our data management strategy? How do we manage all of these assets and make sure that nothing is getting leaked places where it shouldn't be? So you have some of those who are still figuring that out. You have a lot, though, who have started to really kind of put concrete foundations for this is how we as an enterprise want to do this, right? So that's kind of like the first challenge that I see. The second one about things only 10% going into production, that I think is directly caused by two things. The data privacy and control and accessibility, I'll kind of just lump those as one. And then the deployment methodology, or how are we going to run this in a cost-effective manner, right?
Well, but you're saying go into production. You mean production.
I mean production.
Yeah, so there's so much experimentation in AI right now. I think 10% could be a good thing. 10% is the ones that make it through all the gauntlets and they're worth going into production.
You know,
that's at least a third factor.
Sure. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it in that way. I would say, as an organization, right, if you said to me, I want you to invest $5 million, let's say I'm an appropriately sized organization where that's meaningful but not, overly taxing. That I want you to invest $5 million and we've got 100 use cases, right, that could provide value to the organization, and 10% of those will actually, like, we're going to develop all of them or try to develop all of them, right? But only 10% of those are going to make it. And there's really no judgment on whether or not is that the most valuable 10% that are going to make it. I would be dissatisfied with that. And I think that I definitely see your point, but I would be dissatisfied with it. And I would want a more rigorous and controlled process to make sure that the ones that I want to get to production, that I have a path to get them there.
I think so. I think, though, that the ultimate purse holders, the boards and the business leaders and such, they want to see movement. And just the sense I'm getting from the customers I've talked to is that's the game. The game is movement. They want to message it. They want to
The
talk
board level
about it.
mandate.
Well, and corporate level and what have you,
Yeah.
right? The ultimate stakeholders, they all want to be able to communicate an AI strategy with some meat behind it. These are the specific things that we're doing. And if you don't bring up the question, nobody notices. Is it being successful? What's the ROI? What's the way I've been talking about it is that it reminds me of the original PC revolution. I've said this in more than one forum, so pardon me for repeating myself, where for 10, 15, 20 years, people bought desktops and eventually notebooks hand over fist without any really clear micro or macroeconomic, productivity benefit being shown, but the value was evident. The value was obvious and evident. And eventually, productivity gains did come. I think this is the same thing, only it's happening faster. And I'm not arguing with the overall premise and the idea that there are things holding back productivity and out of AI investment. It's just we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of activity that's going to be ultimately beneficial, but the standard enterprise metrics not only don't apply in fact, but may not all apply or should not all apply at this stage.
Yeah,
It's a new space.
and it's when people started going out and buying computers at first. One of the biggest differences you saw was typewriter ribbons stopped being sold and toner cartridges started being sold. And I was going to comment on this as well. An awful lot of enterprise companies, HPE included, there's probably numerous projects that get started, and I would guess the number of them that actually get to the point of being product or organizational projects is probably not a whole lot higher than that 10%.
Yeah.
I can agree with that. I think that there's at any company that's definitely a thing. I think the one wrinkle here, or maybe more than one wrinkle, the wrinkles that I see are that the investments that are being made in AI are so high a cost that it's almost unforgivable to not have some realized gain out of it. That to me, you're going to make a significant investment, and you're right, like that board level mandate or company wide level mandate, we need to figure out an AI strategy, we need to leverage it, has come, and it has come on strong, and people are throwing a lot of money behind it. And so I think the positioning for me, and it'll hopefully help me throughout throughout this presentation, is that a lot of times I've seen that go in the direction of people throwing money at the cloud and telling their people to just go do something, right? And maybe they go spin up some EC2 instances with some really expensive GPUs, or maybe they're going to OpenAI and they're just, leveraging an endpoint and just slamming it with no real concept of
what's the goal?
What's the goal? What are we doing here?
But that is a really good color on this discussion because we all lived through that. We saw it coming, we predicted it, bloat came, over-provisioning came, and then eventually this whole side industry around cost control got developed beneficially to everybody. Go ahead.
And the other comment I was going to make along those lines is even if you have an AI product that makes it to production, it's, an awful lot of the delegates here kind of argue that the only way that you monetize AI is be selling AI hardware.
Stands for additional infrastructure.
Yes.
I've never heard that, and I work in this industry, so I'm a little bit ashamed, but I'm also amused.
I'm interested in you talk about the production, because I don't know exactly the connotation, but I would say that chatbots and AI are being used as tools. I'm wondering when they're being brought in process, and when do they scale, and when do they standardize? And I don't know if that's akin to what you're talking about going to production. Say, like the example used with the basketball team. Is that something that now they use for all their distilling of big information, and that's now throughout the group? Or is it just one group found it to be very helpful and they were able to do it?
So still an active conversation with that basketball team. There's some turnover at the top level of the organization, so still having conversations there. generally, what I'll say is that for me, production is use case driven, right? And sometimes that scope, I would love if AI, and I have to fight this pretty frequently, where people are like, yeah, let's throw AI at it. And currently there's nothing that's like, I can just throw a bunch of documents into anywhere, like some kind of repository, and then just like type in like, a couple of sentences to be like, I want you to figure out every bit of information about these documents. Any question that I ask, I want you to tell me, right? A lot of people think AI works like that. Like just, you throw AI at it. It does whatever you want it to do. It doesn't. You have to really strongly define the workflow that you're trying to affect. You have to strongly define the use case, the end users of it, what the anticipated benefits are so that you kind of architect and march towards that, right? The outcomes of it. And so a lot of times production for me is tied to an implemented use case that fits the requirements that the customer set forward, right? And a lot of times maybe that's limited to a line of business. A lot of times is where I see like a particular line of business has a function that they'd really like to inject a smarter process into using these technologies. As far as like going enterprise wide with it, I've seen it. I've also seen, where it just kind of stays as a function in that line of business because it's something that's kind of core and related to what they do as compared to the rest of the business. But I've also seen chatbots, particularly like with HR documents. It's a great example. I've seen this a lot of times where, great, we are going to have an HR chatbot function, right? And so if someone wants to come in and the questions that they want to ask are things that we can use like RAG against, then we're going to have a RAG agent chatbot that we're going to implement company-wide, and it'll do, any question that somebody wants to ask, hey, what are my, PTO balance, blah, blah, blah. I've seen that.
I think there's a lot of shadow use of AI that's going on. I mean, the developers and stuff like that using various tools to code projects and documentation or content productivity being used, things of that nature. It may not be quote unquote production or enterprise enabled or authorized, but it's happening under the covers to some extent in an organization.
Yeah, I don't think you came here to discuss the value of AI.
No.
So let's actually move on to what you came here to discuss.
All right. I can do that. We'll table it. I've kind of belabored this a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time, maybe just a minute, right? Two places I think realistically you can start. You can start in the public cloud or you can start on-prem, right, or private cloud. And there's a number of different ways to do private cloud, right? You could build it all yourself. You could buy an engineered solution, right? There's a couple of different ways that you can approach it. Our position here and what we've come out with is an answer to that. And so this is an older slide, but I put it here for a reason, just because I want to show you the evolution of it. What we came out with is private cloud for AI, right? PCAI. PCAI is an appliance, right? Your AI factory, your turnkey AI factory. And it is a combination. And so it comes in t-shirt sizes, right? Developer, small, medium, large, extra large, all of them are kind of rack-based except for the developer system. And so throughout these t-shirt sizes, you obviously grow. In these two, you can see that the types, I'm going to use my pointer and not step off the X. You can see that the GPU types change. And this was our generation 1 of this product. We came out with it 1.5 years, 2 years ago. And it is meant, and we initially scoped these to particular types of use cases, right? So a small might be appropriate for inferencing, or a medium might be appropriate for inferencing and RAG applications, right? And a large might be appropriate for fine-tuning and inferencing and RAG, right? And maybe we did ourselves a little bit of a disservice there, because what we started to see was I had customers that come up to me and say, well, yeah, I want to take a 70 billion parameter model and run it on a small, because all we're going to do is inference on it. It's like, well, those GPUs don't have enough memory to even hold the weights for that model unless you quantize it to, a non-usable state, essentially, right? You will degrade accuracy once you quantize it too far. And so what that showed us is that there's more latitude, and we really have to be good about how we work with our customers in understanding their needs and scoping to that. And I like to scope to my customers' first 18 months, right? I'm not going to, advocate that you purchase something that once you do your first use case or first 2 use cases in the first couple of months, then, you got to buy something else. I want to scope this to where you're anticipating that you want to be. How many people do you want on the system doing active development? What are the size of models that you want? What is all the details around throughput and quantization and like all of that stuff there? How many use cases do you have that you want in production by that point? How many do you want in current development? And that's how I start to scope it. That developer system came out just a little bit later because we thought we were missing a segment of the market where we want to prove value, right? The board wants to see value, or the company wants to see value before we make a huge investment, whether it be in hardware or in the cloud. And so we came out with this developer system. The developer system shares all of the exact same software components. Everything is the same, other than just doesn't have as many nodes. It doesn't have all of the networking and the external file system, right? It's integrated storage on it. It's got H100s, which are actually very, very good chips. Very powerful chips.
What's the OS? You don't list the OS across the line there. You have various different, like Ubuntu and Fedora and.
There's a couple. So RHEL and a couple of other flavors of Linux that we've validated.
But what do most people run? I would assume it would be something like Linux of some sort.
It's Linux. It's only Linux. It's not any. It's no Windows or anything. We're seeing lately, we just made an OS shift recently. I think it's Rocky.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Stick, because they've got the Stig support.
And I'm going to kind of tie this back in right after, because this product makes sense when you see it, right? Like, this is a product. It's a thing, right? I build it and integrate it at the factory. I install the software on it, and I come and drop it off to you. You give us some network uplinks and some IP ranges, and we hook it up, turn it on, and you are ready. What are you ready with? And that's the piece that I'm going to tie back in just a second.
Is this NVAE or something else? NVAI Enterprise, or is
Yeah, so NVAIE, which is my least favorite acronym in this entire space because it trips me up all the time. It is a component. We have included that on top of our platform, our software platform that I mentioned that I've been working with for 6+ years.
Okay.
That software platform is what we call AI Essentials. And it's had a life, right, for 6.5 years or so. And it's gone through iterations, but it's the same platform mostly and the same experience. We've included NVIDIA NVAIE on top of that as component inside of there that you run on top of our platform. It's a Kubernetes-based platform. And so that's how we bring things from NVIDIA. And I have some slides on that I'll tie in. We came out with our G2 very recently. I think we announced it at Discover or shortly before or after. We upgraded all the GPUs. We also, except for the developer system, we'll leave that one aside, but we upgraded to the RTX Pro 6000. Those are the Blackwells. And NVIDIA's made some interesting announcements, if anyone's seen it, around the B300s and not offering that in a PCIe form factor because these are so good. And so that's, I guess, my opinion on that. And then we've gone to the H200s in the larger configuration. We've also right-sized the storage, right? The storage is down, and the reason behind this is we included a lot of storage with it originally, and that incurred a lot of cost. We realized through seeing people actually use this system is that this is not meant to house all of your enterprise data. We have data connectors to file shares, to object stores, to structured data, right? We want you to be able to leave your data where it is and connect to that data. The storage that's here is mainly represented as system storage, right, for actual work development that you're doing.
Are you targeting these for training, inferencing, both other AI activities? What's sort of the goal?
The only place where I would not target it is at full-blown training.
Okay.
Of very large models.
Right, but so you're looking at these as an enterprise would stand up 1, maybe 2 racks here of this to build their inferencing cluster for their production environment.
But the slide says fine tuning as that's the large, not the extra large, extra super dupers coming next year. But the large currently in market was that 32 up? 16 or 32 up, right? 16 per rack.
With the racks, yeah.
So it says fine tuning on there. There's no, I mean, you can always train SLMs or what have you. Yeah, you're not really looking at more than that.
Probably up to, I have a great example of this, and I was going to include it in my kind of cloud costs, right? I had a customer who wanted to train and I'll reference back to it later, but I had a customer who wanted to train a 70 billion parameter model from scratch, right? Because they were in a kind of a nuanced domain and they didn't really feel like anything was appropriate or accurate enough based on their testing. And so that you can do it, right? Because ultimately what they would need is essentially, let's call it 64 H100, or they were actually A100s was the instance type that they had. That was just what they standardized on in their cloud provider. And they were going to need their dual GPU instances. They were going to need 64 GPUs, so 32 instances running at full bore for 21 days to train that model, right? Their instance cost is $10 to $30 per hour for each of those instances. If you do the math of the 32 instances times 24 hours a day times 20, it's $330,000 for 3 weeks of training to train that model, right? This is where this becomes very competitive because these are things that you own this. You can pipe whatever you want through it. The only cost you're going to incur is a little bit of extra power, right?
And these things don't consume anywhere near enough power. To be AI stacks, they need to consume way more power.
Is that a...
No, we've talked about racks consuming 120 kilowatts.
Yeah.
And more.
Well, that's because these don't have that's what I was getting at. Is these are designed to be a standalone unit, no optics going out of here to another stack. It's not part of a huge leaf spine network, and therefore it's not consuming that much power for all the I/O.
They're not fully populated, right? Like not every slot is populated. There are a defined number of nodes that are inside of here, right? With 2 8-way boxes essentially for the large.
And the large gangs can gang 2 or no? I don't remember. Two racks or no?
3.
3.
Yeah, the large can be expanded up to 3.
48.
64.
3 plus 1.
It would be 16 plus the 3, which would give
Got
you
it.
64.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
So it's 4 racks. There's networking across the racks. There's 400 gig networking.
At that point, once you put in a network switch in there, that's going to be a lot more than 17K
per rack.
Per rack, because then it depends on if you can go 4 racks on copper or 4 racks on optical.
Yeah.
As much as I like to masquerade like I'm a hardware nerd, I'm a software person.
Great. Let's get to the software.
I like that.
Thanks.
So wait, what makes it a developer system?
It's
smaller.
Apologies. The developer system is very specifically designed.
It fits on your desk.
It does not have, if you notice, like you have
So close.
3 control plane nodes and all the other form factors. You've got you've got dedicated nodes for a file system, right? You've got the networking, the switches included. Developer doesn't have any of that. It's got 1 control plane node, 1 worker node. There's 32 terabytes of integrated storage in it. That's it. It's not meant for production. It is meant for you to test and develop your use cases, and you get to use the exact same software set here that you do here. And so now workloads become very easy to transition as you grow up the stack. That's the purpose of the developer kit. I'll skip the air-gapped, right? We did just recently come out with air-gapped for heavily regulated industries where you can be completely disconnected, right? If you want to do updates or something, maybe you have trusted mirrors or floppy disks, right? Kidding about the floppy disks.
We're awake. You got us.
So what's in here, right? I've talked a little bit about it. This is where I start to get into my favorite part of this, the software side of it. So what's represented inside of here? It's 4 things at its core. It's hardware from HPE, that's the servers, right? It's hardware from NVIDIA, that's going to be the GPUs and the switches. And then it's software from HPE, which is AI Essentials. And then it's NVAIE, software from NVIDIA. 4 things that represent what's inside of here. And there's other stuff, right? The control plane on the right side, very interesting. It's Kubernetes, there's virtualization. So this becomes a very interesting kind of like set of how we manage skills and then things that we put onto it, like a service mesh, right? Things to help manage all of this and keep things communicating clearly and applying policy. And we've got a lot of very interesting stuff inside of here. But I will keep it there. The capabilities that it gives you, and this is, I swear, I'm getting to the cool stuff. Mm-hmm. Capabilities that it gives you is that when I drop this off to you, rather than you having to go and say, great, if you want to build this yourself, what's it going to take? Well, you're going to have to sit down and you're going to have to go, okay, what are we going to do? well, all right, let's get some hardware first. What hardware are we going to get? What GPUs? Is it all homogeneous? If we have multiple racks, can we do heterogeneous GPU deployments? Can we do any of that, right? What tools are we going to use? I don't know if everybody's seen that big old ugly slide with like, the million AI vendors, right? There's been like a decade now where we've seen different versions of that slide. Go pick what you want to use, right? And then how are you going to integrate all that together? Right? And then, okay, what about drivers for your GPUs? You have the appropriate drivers, right? All your versions and everything, all this. So you got to make all those decisions first, and then you got to actually build it, right? And then you got to set up the networking. You got to do all of these little things, right? Rather than do that, this gives you the opportunity that, like, literally at the end of day one, someone can go, a data scientist can go and can have fingers on keyboard doing, right? That's huge because it's so much time and undifferentiated work that we're taking out off the table, right? The differentiated work is what you really want, where people are doing things that meaningfully impact your business rather than just setting up hardware and software.